Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. His immensity graces us with his presence as the Warhammer World Championship final playoff bracket is underway. This time it is going to be between Guacc on the Greenskins versus Slate X, going to be commanding the Tomb Kings. This is going to be a best of 5, so buckle up, ladies and gentlemen. You are in for a ride. So for the Greenskins, we do have Savage Orc Biggins mixed in with some Orc Biggins, as well as they're going to be compromising a very strong frontline infantry for the most part, and then we're going to have some goblins on the two flanks here, and then we are going to have some Orc Boar Boys in their rear. There are a couple of those, as well as 3 of the regular trolls. They do have some nice little bit of regen, so even if they do get routed off, they will be back with a vengeance. For the caster, we do have an Orc Shaman going to be coming in with a Brain Burster and Fist of Gork, so Brain Burster can be very nice against like Tomb Guard, for example. Very nice tightly packed infantry, generally pretty low armor, so that's going to do very nice indeed. And also with Fist of Gork imbuing magic damage and giving plus 24 melee attack and melee defense to a specific unit. And then we of course have Gromma the Punch. He's going to be rolling in on his chariot. He is going to be bringing a Language of the Boys, which gives plus 5 melee defense and plus 4 leadership in an AoE with immune to psychology when he is engaged in melee. That does last for 30 seconds. We do have a Great Dun is here, giving additional leadership, base weapon damage, and melee attack again in an AoE around him. And a Lucky Banner going to be providing him for a nice little bit of staying power, so plus 40 melee attack and plus 40% damage resist. Very nice ability there, probably his best item on his kit. For the rest of the units, it is just going to be some 4 Scout Spider Riders across the board here. So there is going to be a third one off in the trees on the farthest flank here. Just the melee variant, so there's going to be no ranged, and I think that might be just a little bit of a mistake there. I think dropping one of the 4 Scout Spider Riders and getting just 2 of the range instead of all of 3 melee, I think will definitely help getting that poison to exactly where you need it. But otherwise, that is it for the Greenskins. Let's kind of swing on over to what the Tomb Kings have to offer. For the Tomb Kings, it is going to be Arkan the Black. Arkan is going to be coming in. It looks like we do have Spirit Leech and Fate of Buna for the 2 spells. So Spirit Leech is really good. It's kind of whittling things down bit by bit, and then Fate of Buna is for those very elite units. Going to be doing a lot more damage to those guys. We do have the Libra Mortis as well as the Tomb Blade of Arkan. So we're going to be foregoing the Staff of Nagash. Instead, just going to be going with a pretty slimmed down version of Arkan. I mean, he is going to be on foot, but he still does have the Unwielding, or My Will Be Done, and as well as the Curse to boot as well. So that does give it an additional plus 5 melee attack and melee defense, plus in the Curse does a nice little bit of damage. For the frontline units, it is going to be some Skeleton Spearmen on the 2 flanks. Center rank's going to be a bit more elite, so we do have the Kepra Guard, a very strong unit, but again, that is going to be one of the key targets for that Brain Burster on the Greenskin side. But if they are not accounted for, that magical damage will cut right through those Savage Orcs very effectively. We do have King Nakesh's Scorpion Legion as well, which do have poison, and they'll be a very nice addition to that front line, holding back those trolls quite efficiently. And of course, they do have that poison, which will even help that engagement even more so. And some more Tomb Guards to wrap up that front line. 2 Tomb Scorpions as well. Bonus versus infantry, armor piercing, and they do have Fear and Terror, which is very, very effective. For the range units, we do have 5 Skeleton Archers spread across. One of them is the Blessed Legion, and that is going to give them that armor sundering, which is very nice, especially if there's going to be stone trolls. But the Greenskins not going to be having too much in the terms of heavy armor, so really their best target is just going to be pretty much lowering that armor of like Grom, for example. I mean, he does have 100 armor, so that will help in that. And then of course the Savage, or not the Savage Orcs, the regular Orc Boar Boy or Orc Biggins going to be providing some nice bit of assistance there. We do have Skeleton Archers, or Skeleton Horsemen with the Nehekron Horsemen as well for that mobility, and then just some more Skeleton Warriors and Skeleton Spearmen for that backline, keeping those archers nice and safe. But it is going to be it. Now let's roll on into the main battle here. As the army is going to be moving forward, Greenskins pretty straightforward approach here. They have no ranged. They have a couple of mobility units, but for the most part, it is going to be just one big hammer, going to be trying to just mow right on through that Tomb King front line. And then Grom is just going to be dodging some shots here in that early stages, and I'm going to be expecting to see some Brain Bursts coming on in from that Orc Shaman. Going to be providing some nice bit of assistance, but a nice little charge. Going to be getting some of that free damage, but Grom does need to be quite careful. There is a bunch of archers archers here, as well as that Tomb Scorpion. He is going to be hit by a Spirit Leech, so that is going to be whittling him down bit by bit, and some Skeleton Horsemen as well going to be charging on in, so he is taking a bit of damage, but of course Grom does have that regen, but of course he is kind of just getting a little pushed backwards here, not able to really regain his footing, but the Savage Orc Biggins do charge into that front line, and they are going to be trading rather well into those Tomb Guard, but you see that Brain Burster, they're going to be doing a nice bit of damage, but most of that unit was kind of on the move there, so it's going to be dodging most of that damage. Grom the Punch, though, on the other hand, taking a bit of himself. He is getting quite low, well, I guess down to about 50% health, but he will be able to regen through all of that, and there is still a ton of archers, though, just going to be opening up onto the front line of the Tomb Kings. And I do hear that Fate of Buna going to be going down on the Savage Orcs. We do have the Lever Mortis as well, giving plus 44 physical resist and leadership to the Tomb Kings in that little pocket there. Going to be keeping them in that fight, and especially the Kepler Guard need to be staying in, but they are just getting whittled down quite quickly, and that front line is starting to waver on kind of both sides here. The Trolls not having the best leadership to start off with, but we are going to be seeing potentially a charge from these Orc Boar Boys, but the Wah does sound, and the Greenskin's going to be getting that extra staying power. That Immunopsychology especially helpful, especially with the Tomb Scorpions in separate areas of that front line, going to be keeping those rest of the Greenskins nice and in that fight for as long as physically possible. Orc Biggins and the Savage Orcs doing very well on this front. Another Brain Burst hitting those Kepler Guard, getting them very, very low, down to critical, as this flank here for the Greenskins looking very, very strong, especially now we do have some goblins coming on in, and we do get an Ushapti summon as well, going to be routing off these Forest Goblin Spider Riders, and then they will be able to turn their attention to that front line, though however Grom the Paunch is getting very, very low. He is on just slivers of HP, and if he does end up surviving here, that is definitely going to be providing a nice bit of or just potential of a way back for the Greenskins, as they do have that a bit of a loss in that balance of power. We do have some some Trolls coming back in that back line, and they're going to be looking to get right on top of like the Skeleton Archers, the Blessed Legion as well, but they do need to really have Grom survive here. They need him in that late game, especially for that Immunopsychology, which is so very, very important. Another Brain Burster looking to be pretty much finishing off the Kepler Guard. Only 9 models left, and that should be all she wrote for that unit there. Arkan is actually being able to chase off that Orc Shaman. Orc Shaman has taken quite a bit of damage, but has been able to whittle down those Kepler Guard quite effectively throughout the course of this fight. As the Ushapti summon does dissipate, it is going to provide a little bit of a relief for that front line for the Greenskins. However, these Orc Biggins are beset on all sides. We do have some Skeleton Warriors, and of course these Anahakron Horsemen are a major, major threat for the Greenskins here, as just everything is on just slivers of HP, routing across the board. Not looking so great for the Greenskins in this first game here, as the Tomb Kings have a rather good army, especially with how healthy this Tomb Scorpion is. The other one is getting fairly low, and Arkan has been able to stay nice and healthy, and now with Grom the Paunch routing, even though he did have his Lucky Banner popped, he is going to be getting pushed off, and especially with these Anahakron Horsemen in hot pursuit, I don't think Grom is going to be returning to this fight anytime soon. They will be outpacing these chasing Trolls, and that is going to be it for Grom the Punch. Though we do have some Orc Boar Boys here coming in for a frontal charge, going to be trying to free up Grom the Punch at all costs at this point. They really need to try everything that they can to separate these Anahakron Horsemen, and it looks like they are able to do that, and these Trolls now going to be able to put a beat down on these Anahakron Horsemen, and that is going to be giving Grom that nice little bit of extra breathing room. Might be enough for him to make a surprise appearance in the late game for this fight, but the frontline engagement, the Trolls, the rest of that front line is looking very, very slim pickings for the Greenskins, as there is still plenty of archers online, though these Force God Spider Riders have been able to get on to the back of these Blessed Legion, though they are not able to really last too long in melee and do end up routing, and that is going to free up those Blessed Legion to be starting firing once again into the retreating Greenskins. At this point, Trolls once again routing on this flank, and if we look, I do believe that is Grom the Punch returning to the fight. He's going to be coming back with a vengeance in that late game, healing all the way back to that front line, though the Greenskins are in sore need of him and his return, especially with these Tomb Scorpions running havoc amongst the front line. It does look like one of them may have succumbed to crumbling. I do not see its carcass sitting amongst the battlefield, but here is one quite healthy, and that is going to be routing off these Orc Boar Boys, at least terrifying them out, because that fear and terror are going to be very, very important, and a beautiful Brain Burster right into the middle of the Skeleton Archers, as the Orc Shaman is able to start casting once again, and there is plenty of returning troops troops for the Greenskins as a bounce power starting to shift back towards the center as all of the regenerating units, like the Trolls, Grom the Paunch, all of that gaining that balance power back bit by bit. But we do get a summon from the Tomb Blade of Arkan into the middle of this engagement over here, and that is going to be putting a major hurt on these Orc Biggins as once again that Orc Shaman does rout for the second time and getting very, very low, may actually end up shattering at this point, and that is going to be it for the spellcasting. But Grom coming back, starting to get a little bit of its HP back, but the bounce power starting to drop down more and more into the Tomb King's favor, and before Grom is even able to get into melee, he once again does rout, and this time the Nahakron Horsemen going to be making sure they finish the job, going to be chasing him down once again. And again, here are those Orc Boar Boys looking for another frontal charge, a repeat of their last performance, going to be charging on in. This time that those Nahakron Horsemen are going to be returning the favor, but that is going to be all she wrote. Greenskins do end up conceding here, seeing that the bounce power was heavily against them. So let's take a little look at that after battle report, and we'll update the scorecard as well as the Tomb Kings do take that first game, giving Slate X an early lead. This is a best of 5 though, so it is a long way from being done. So let's take a look at how things did fare on both sides. So the Tomb Scorpions doing quite well. One of them able to just barely pay for themselves. They do cost 1,000 for each of those units. Other one doing okay, and what did have quite a bit of health, and really that Fear and Terror was super helpful, especially when Grom the Paunch was unable to provide that immunopsychology to that front line and having to rely solely on the Wa to be giving that. And then the rest of the forces, the Nahakron Horsemen doing rather well as you traditionally expected, but man, those Blessed Legion getting 1,300 just for themselves with that armor sundering, just all of that fire being put on to the Greenskins, a ton of value on those guys. Rest of the archers doing decent, but nothing too exorbitant. Kepler Guard was still able to get some decent damage, though they were the focus of those brain bursts, as I was mentioning at the onset of that fight. That is one of the biggest downsides of Tomb Guard here is they are very strong against pretty much all of the Greenskin front line, with the exception of, I think, Black Orcs, but they still suffer very greatly from that brain burst, as there's just so many effective tools for the Greenskins to deal with them. Rest of the infantry has kind of held that front line, and Arkan able to generate some nice bit of value with his spellcasting. Spirit Leeches and Fate Abuna able to generate him almost 1,300 in total value. As for the Greenskin sides, the Trolls were able to keep coming back to that fight, but they weren't able to really generate anything to write home about. Even the mobility of the Orc Boar Boys, nothing too spectacular, but the Force Comm Spider Riders did some decent work. These guys did get 800. Orc Biggins able to do some decent work as well as the Savage Orcs, one of them even getting 1,200, very strong, especially when there isn't that magic damage, especially like the Kepler Guard, for example, is a very strong counter to the Savage Orcs, but Savage Orcs imbued with some nice bit of Fist of Guacc, given that plus 24 melee attack and melee defense, are able to punch a major hole in those Tomb King front lines. And then, as you can see, that Orc Shaman, pretty much all of that was against the Kepler Guard, so that was a very useful application of their Winds of Magic. And then Grom the Paunch was probably one of the unfortunate aspects of the Greenskin side. They really did need Grom the Paunch and his immunopsychology to keep all of their units in that fight, because the terror routes from those Tomb Scorpions were just so damaging to that front line, just constantly causing terror routes up and down that front line. But that's going to be all she wrote for Game 1. Let's roll on into Game 2. This is a best of 5 after all, so there is going to be plenty of games yet to come, and this is going to be a road for sure. So let's get on into it. The Fey Enchantress and her backup dancers will be accompanying us in this Game 2 matchup between Bretonnia, going to be led by Guacc, and the Greenskins, as Slade takes command of them for Game 2. So for the Bretonian forces, which is definitely one of Guacc's specialties, we are going to be having spearmen at arms for that front line, with the peasant mobs going to be acting more as reserve and just chaff on the flanks and in the rear, keeping the quad peasant bowmen with pox arrows nice and healthy, making sure that they are able to provide poison across the board against the Greenskins. For the Lords and Heroes, of course, we do have that Fey Enchantress. Fey Enchantress is going to be bringing Earthblood and Regrowth. She does also have Favor of the Fey, which does give us plus 40 melee attack to a unit. We do have those backup paladins coming in, neither of which do have that guardian. Usually you are going to be seeing one of them with that. For the rest of the units, we do have some mobility with a couple of the Knights of the Realm on one far flank. Otherwise, it is going to be 4 questing knights for the rest of that mobility spread across that back line. Going to be keeping them kind of out of range of any potential long-range artillery from the Greenskins, but that is it for the Bretonnians. So for the Greenskins, we are going to be having double Black Orcs for that front line, a very heavily armored, very elite 50 weapon strength armor piercing to boot. They're going to be a major problem for the Bretonnians, though the questing knights will be able to pierce through their armor, as is the Black Orcs going to be able to penetrate theirs. On the flanks, we do have some Orc Biggins as well. Going to be a nice sturdy frontline unit. In the very front, we do have the 8P Cloonies. They do have their Fanatic ability, and they are unbreakable to boot as well. We do have a couple of nasty Skulkers. They do have that a little bit of a smoke bomb here. Going to be providing 72% reduction to speed and charge speed. A little nice bit of control there. Some Force Scum Spider Riders with the Morgrub's Mangy Marauders, the ROR Goblin Wolf Archer, which does have those armor-piercing missile fire. A couple of the Force Scum Spider Rider, just the melee variants. They are going to be providing some just some poison with those guys. For the Lord, it is going to be Skarsnik rolling on in with that fermented fungi, causing a unit to rampage and reducing their melee defense to boot. A very nice control, so plenty of control on the Greenskins so far. We do have Spider of the Bad Moon as well, which does give bonus versus large, bonus base weapon damage and armor piercing. So against the cavalry, that will be a very nice ability to be using. We do have an Orc Shaman coming in with Brain Burster, good against all of the archers for the Bretonnians, and in the rear we have a Night Goblin Shaman with Vindictive Glare, as well as, I believe that is Guacc will fix it, giving that reduction to charge bonus speed and charge speed, much like those nasty Skulkers. So plenty of speed reductions across the Greenskin roster. And of course, he does also have Wand of Jet, giving a nice little extra boost to those power reserves at power recharge rate, trying to get as much Wisdom magic as possible. For the monster, we do have, of course, the Ragnarok Queen. Ragnarok Queen does come with those Spider Hatchling summons, which is going to be already used right here. They do have poison when in melee, so both sides, plenty of poison to go around. It is pretty much just going to be a wash then, as both sides can be applying it to pretty much the entire front line on both sides, and even a bit of the mobility. But that is going to be it. So let's roll on in, as the Bretonnians going to be slowly pushing forward bit by bit, as now the questing knights, seeing that they don't really have too much to worry about, so they are going to be a little bit more bold. They don't have any trebuchets to really dodge, as the Fae and the Paladins going to be charging in, getting right into these Night Goblins, as the Night Goblins just trying to whittle them down, because once they do get below 25% HP, they are unable to use their Fanatics. And these questing knights, really, these Night Goblins are the only units they have to worry about. We do get one of those Brain Bursts into those Peasant Bowmen in the rear. Going to be doing a nice bit of damage there, but this might be opening up a nice little Fanatics cast. I think the Night Goblins really do need to use it. We do get that Smoke Bomb on this front, going to be hitting those questing knights, reducing their speed, going to be allowing those nasty Skulkers, especially with a charge of the rest of the units, be doing a nice little bit of damage. These questing knights did take a bit of damage themselves. Spider of the Bad Moon was popped on the Ragnarok Queen, and it is an AoE spell, so it is going to be given that bonus versus large. Questing knights pulling out of there, trying to avoid as much of that incoming damage as possible. Night Goblins have taken about 50% HP damage, and I did not see a Fanatics cast go off, so they still have 3 of those in the back pocket. Paladin actually taking quite a bit of damage, as the Ragnarok Queen doing a nice bit of work to the hero core, as Skarsnik does pop in. He does pop that fermented fungi, and I think that is going to be going against the Fae. So the Fae is going to be Rampage, so that means no healing. None of her abilities are going to be able to use, so she doesn't get that favor of the Fae or anything like that. Gorg will fix it. All of these abilities going down, so the Paladin does end up routing. The Fae is taking a bunch of damage, but if the Fae is able to regain her senses, which she does do, so she should be able to start healing herself up. And Earthblood does go down, healing up as much as it can, but the Ragnarok Queen did take a ton of damage in the meantime, as just there wasn't enough support around that Arachnarok Queen. A beautiful Brain Burst in that back line, hitting those Peasant Bowmen, taking them down to about half HP at this point. And the Black Orcs, though, across that front line, doing very good work. Orc Begins as well, starting to get into that back line. And the really, the Black Orcs are going to be the biggest problem for the Bretonnians, as the Questing Knights are going to be really the biggest problem for the Greenskins, because especially with the loss of that Arachnarok Queen, not necessarily necessarily lost just yet, but that Arachnoid Queen is getting rather low, and unlike the Bretonnians, that Arachnoid Queen will not be healing up, and there is plenty of mobility in that back line for the Bretonnians to really just help chase things off. Knights of the Realm going to be just trying to keep the pressure up in that backline across the board against the Greenskins, and Skarsnik is in a very bad spot. He is just caught between a rock and a hard pace, getting a little overextended, as both the Paladins going to be putting a major beatdown on him, and especially with those Questing Knights keeping him in place for quite a long time. I think that is going to be just about the end of Skarsnik in this fight, or if he does return, but especially with that last hit, I don't think that is going to be the case. Skarsnik is going to be actually falling completely there to both of those Paladins, and the Arachnoid Queen again in a tough spot right now, with all of those Questing Knights just surrounding the Arachnoid Queen, as she does get a pretty low in terms of leadership and HP at this point, going to be routing off the field, and potentially might just be falling to all of this archer fire from the Peasant Bowmen, as both of the Paladins, and especially these Knights of Realm, getting a nice charge in to that routing Arachnoid Queen, and down she will go. And with the Arachnoid Queen down with Skarsnik down, I think that is going to be just about it, because that is it for the Terror. The Fey Enchantress does come back from that Terror route, and there's still plenty of Peasant Bowmen off on the fringes. These Questing Knights are getting pushed back by the Orc Biggins, actually end up getting shattered. Plenty of mobility still left on the Greenskin side, but they're not going to be able to do too well against a charge from the Questing Knights, Knights of the Realm. So they are going to be in a bit of a tough pickle, especially with both of the Paladins nice and healthy, and the other one getting some nice bit of heals from that Fey Enchantress, who is getting close to her own healing cap, but the balance power is pretty heavily in Bretonnia's favor at this point. They just have way more range left. They have the mobility advantage at this point. All of like this Spire Hatchlings, I mean, that is a summon after all, but like Dasty Skulkers, all the Forscum Spider Riders, they're getting very low in terms of ammunition across the board, even Morgrav's Mangy Marauders, and really the Fey Enchantress and both of the Paladins going to be taking down that Night Goblin Shaman, and I think with that is going to be it for the spellcasting. I don't know where that Orc Shaman is, and there is that Orc Shaman going to be wavering himself, routing off the field, and that I think is going to be the final nail in the coffin for the Greenskins. Bretonnia looking very strong in this Game 2 match, and it does look like Guacc is going to be evening out the series at 1-1. Fey Enchantress, both the Paladins being too much, and that is going to be army losses, and the Bretonnians do take Game 2. I think there is going to be just some sneaky little goblins who are unbreakable still left, but that is it. So let's take a look at that after battle report and update the scorecard as well to reflect the even score. Now it is going to be, of course, 1-1. We're going to be getting into Game 3 momentarily, but first let's go over all of the units on both sides from this match. The Arachnoid Queen able to generate some decent amount of value, but definitely not enough. It was a little too ambitious here in this fight. With that Arachnoid Queen and Skarsnik, they had both been a lot more reserved and not charging all the way forward, trying to finish off those Paladins and the Fey Enchantress right from the get-go. I think the Greenskins may have turned this around in the end game, but unfortunately that was not the case. Their Terror off the field, as well as was their Lord. Though the Lord Skarsnik was able to generate 1,200 while he was still alive, so that is a little bit of something there. The Night Goblin Shaman, not a whole lot. The Orc Shaman with the nice Brain Burst is able to do some nice damage to those Peasant Bowmen. Unfortunately, though, wasn't able to peel off enough models, as you can kind of see from all of these health bars. For the front line, just taking a quick little look there, Nasty Skulkers actually did do quite well, 500, 600 between the two of them. The 8 Peakaloonies getting 960 themselves. Orc Biggins and even the Black Orcs. Unfortunately, though, the Black Orcs really didn't do all too well. Those Questing Knights did quite a number to those guys, and the mobility, well, they still had some left in the late game, especially, I mean, the Morgrav's Mage Marauders did quite well against the Questing Knights. Unfortunately, it was just not quite enough. There was plenty of poison on the Bretonnian side to really counter their poison. Questing Knights, only one of them was really able to generate some noticeable value. I mean, the others did okay, but not quite able to pay for themselves. Peasant Bowmen, though, was really where that value was coming from. All of them able to pay for themselves, just having so many models left, able to keep firing in those arrows, and applying poison is the important part across that front line. And then the rest of the infantry really didn't do anything. I mean, even the peasant mobs were able to generate more value than these spearmen at arms, and that is saying something indeed. The paladins able to get some nice value, 1200 on this one, and then the Fey Enchantress getting 1000. Really, though, the heals were the big thing from the Fey instead of her Mortis Engine Drain that she usually is going to be generating quite a bit of value herself. But that is going to be game 2, so let's roll on in to game 3 of this best of 5 series between Guacc and Slade X. A contract has been issued, and the Deathmaster Snicketch will be making sure that it is carried out in full as the Skaven scurry away against the forces of the Empire in this Game 3 match between Guacc on the Skaven, and we'll be having Slade X on the Empire. So for the Skaven army, we do have Clanrat Spears for that front line, and they will be backed up by a bunch of infantry or units as well. So we do have some Skaven Slave Slingers. We do have, I believe, 3 units in total of those guys. In the mix is going to be some Warblock Jezzails, 3 in total, one of which is a Natty Boopy Sharpshooter, so they do have stock and snipe, so they will be able to stay hidden even when they are firing until the enemy is close enough to see them themselves, though they will be able to track their fire as well. We do have some Rat Ogres in that backline, and especially against like Empire Knights, if they are able to get the charge, they will be able to actually win that engagement. And then for the spellcasting, it is going to be a Plague Priest, and the Plague Priest is going to be bringing, unlike most loadouts, we are going to be seeing double Pestilent Breath, one of which is the bound ability from being on top of that Plague Furnace. The other is the spell which does cost 8 winds of magic. We have Vermintide, and we will not be seeing the Plague Monk summons, just going with the Clan Rats here. We do have Scrying Stone giving plus 22% damage resist, 8 leadership as well. And that is a very nice little ability. We have a 15-second usage and 60-second cooldown, probably one of the better items to be having on that Plague Priest. Keeping it nice and alive, especially considering it is a Mortis engine on that furnace. For the Lord, it is the Deathmaster Snicketch. He does have 3 Concealment Bombs and the Deathmaster Sigil, which is a nice little snare for any Lords or Heroes. It does only last 7 seconds, though, so you do have to be on top of it when you do use that. Again, we have an Assassin to heal, to assist him in these engagements, so he is going to be bringing the Rival High Talisman as well as the Assassin's Trophy, some nice little debuffs as well to be added in with that Concealment Bomb. And then for the backline, it is just going to be Skaven Slaves for the just a little bit of extra protection for all of these Jezzails and just kind of keeping things up and operational for as long as possible. But now let's swing on over to the forces of the Empire. And what do we have here? We have Volkmar on foot. What heresy is this? Slade X, what have you done? Volkmar does not walk, he only rides his chariot. Don't you know this? But Volkmar the Grim going to be waltzing on in to this battle. He does have that Grand Hammer of Sigmar, which does give a nice little bit of buff to that melee attack in an AoE. He has the Grand Shield of Faith and the Grand Soulfire Bombardment, but he's going to have to be very, very careful against those double assassins on the Skaven side. He does have his Jade Griffin, so he does get a little bit of extra regeneration, but he is not unbreakable unless he is on top of his War Chariot. For the front line, though, it is going to be a bunch of swordsmen all the way across, one of which is the Sigmar Sons, who do have Unbreakable. We have a Warrior Priest as well assisting that front line for a Hammer for the Shield of Faith and the Soulfire as well. So a little bit of extra chaff clearing power with both of those combined. But I think you really needed to get Volkmar up on his chariot. I mean, he is weak to those Jezzail fires, which are all trying to focus him down, but even on foot, those Jezzails are very, very accurate. In the secondary line, we do have a bunch of Flagellants as well, and they are all unbreakable, just trying to mow through the Skaven as quickly as possible. And then we have 4 crossbowmen as well, as they are just some nice units against Skaven, really, because they have decent range, they have low armor piercing, but you don't really have to worry about that against the Skaven because they all pretty much have low armor in, unless you are going to be seeing some Storm Vermin, and really that is not that common of a pick. For this spell casting, we do have a Bright Wizard coming in with Burning Head and Fireball. especially good against the Skaven here. Low armor, that is a pretty standard loadout for those guys. A couple of spearmen on the flanks here, just keeping those crossbowmen alive and well, and a couple of Empire Knights for that mobility. But that is going to be it for the Empire side, so let's roll on in as the Jezzail's already just opening up onto Volkmar. That's one of the reasons why you really do want him on his chariot. He's going to be able to tank that damage just a little bit better, but all of the Jezzail's just pointing their attention directly towards Volkmar, and we do get that Plague Priest moving on forward, looking to be getting probably a cheeky little summon in, just kind of slowing down the front line, but instead going to be using that Plague Breath going right through those Flagellants, taking them down 50% HP, and now all of the Flagellants, now that Bright Wizard, or not the Flagellants, all of the Jezzail's, now that the Flagellants, now that the Bright Wizard is in range, is just going to be taking them down, all of the Jezzail's, making sure that Bright Wizard does not get a single cast off, as that Bright Wizard is going to be going right back the way it came, as the Plague Priest, as it does retreat to its own line, is going to be getting one of the summons off right into the middle of the crossbowmen, really mucking up that back line for the Empire, and Empire just trying to find those holes in that engagement, getting these Sigmar Suns straight on through, trying to get on top of those Natty Boopy Sharpshooters, as the Flagellants, again, trying to find their own hole here to get on top of the other ones, but the Rat Ogre is going to be having a thing or two to say about that, charging through their own lines, hoping to support those Clan Rat Spears, who are on the verge of wavering themselves, and all of these Jezzail's just doing so much damage, even against these Empire Knights, though we do have the Bright Wizard back and alive, might be wanting to get at least some spell casting off here, get a few fireballs cast away their direction. Volkmar the Grim now is actually able to engage that front line directly, having avoided all of these Warplock Jezzail's, as all of their attention was instead focused on the Empire Knights, that Bright Wizard, for example. And all the crossbowmen doing a lot of damage to that Plague Priest, taking off a nice bit of its HP. Balance power, though, is in the Skaven's favor, as both of these assassins, I think, have already taken out that Empire, or the Warrior Priest off on this side of the Empire formation, and they are a major threat, especially with Volkmar on foot. They are going to be looking for him next, as they're going to be making sure that these spearmen are finished off and then turning their attention elsewhere. We do get that Grand Soulfire Bombardment going to be raining down on top of these Rat Ogres. All of these crossbowmen still able to fire in, getting a nice bit of damage, routing off these Clan Rat Spears. Going to be trying to deal with these Rat Ogres next, and I do hear a little explosion coming on in. I think a fireball was finally cast, looking to be hitting those Natty Boopy Sharpshooters, or actually I think it was probably going after that Plague Priest, as the Flagellants really pushing far into that back line with those Sigmar Suns. They are all unbreakable, so the Skaven going to be having a hard time dealing with them, but that Plague Priest does have that Vortex Engine Drain, so it doesn't have to worry too much about like all the Swordsmen, all of the Flagellants, going to be able to just whittle them down bit by bit, and especially with these Rat Ogres doing a nice little bit of extra damage, and all of these Skaven Slave Slingers, which is really unfortunate for all of these Flagellants. Those Slingers do quite well against them, considering they have exceptionally low armor. I think they might even have 0, if I remember correctly, so yeah, they do have 0. So that damage is going to be exceptionally brutal against them. The Plague Priest, its animation is able to dodge one more fireball, as it does pass harmlessly into the air, and Army Losses does take hold of the forces of Sigmar, and the Skaven do take game 2, which does mean Guacc takes the lead 2-1, but the series is not over yet. We'll update the scorecard and then go over the last game real quick here. So Guacc is up 2-1. And now for the forces of the Empire. Unfortunately, the Gambit did not work out. Volkmar the Grim on foot, only getting 240. You really do need to have him on his chariot. I'm not really sure what the idea was with that. Maybe funds, but I mean, having him on his chariot makes him unbreakable. All of that regen, the high armor, just way better. It makes him just a powerhouse of a lord. Rest of the formation just not doing a whole lot of damage. I mean, the crossbowmen did okay on that one, 470 on those guys, 495. Sigmar Suns, Flagellants, again, it's just not really able to generate the value that they needed to. I mean, the idea was there. I think they needed to go wider with that formation, really wrap around the Skaven formation. You had the numbers to do it. which is usually not the case against the Skaven. Usually they have the numbers against you, but that was something that you had to have enough either gaps in the formation, or you needed to wrap around with the swordsman, get a nice flanking maneuver, get into those warp block Jezzails, which I'm sure generated quite a bit of value. I mean, all these swordsmen really just weren't able to generate that. The warrior priest getting taken out by those assassins so early on, Bright Wizard getting shot to pieces by Jezzails, and then Volkmar just didn't have any really good targets for him. So we look at the assassins. Deathmaster Snickich getting 1,500, the regular assassin getting 1,000, Plague Priest 860, rest of the infantry, I mean, pretty much as you expect. It is Skaven after all, you're not going to be getting a whole lot of value. However, the Skaven Slave Slingers, on the other hand, 300 on those guys, 277, only 60. So, I mean, they generate some decent value for against the Flagellants, though they got a lot of value against those guys. I think really bringing these guys, that was really the best unit that you could bring against Flagellants. Having 0 armor is really a very key target for those Skaven Slave Slingers just be poking away at throughout the course of the fight. Now the Jezzails doing some nice bit of work. Natty Boo Boo's getting 1,000, and then all of the Rat Ogres generating some nice value as well. So decent value across the board for the Skaven. Nothing too outlandish between any of the 1 units. But that's going to be it for Game 3. Now we're going to be getting into Game 4. All the way to Game 4. Plenty of good fun so far. Some very nice games and some rather interesting builds as well. Always expect that from Slate X. So let's roll on into the next one. Cold wings unfurled as the Frostworm takes to the skies above the battlefield for this Game 4 matchup. We do have ITO Guacc on the Norskins, and Slate X will be commanding the Dark Elves. And for the Norskins, we do, of course, have that Frostworm, a very rare sighting on the battlefield, but a fun one to see nonetheless. It does have that Frostbite for its attacks. It does have magical attacks as well for when it is in melee. It has a nice little chilling aura, reducing the speed around it. So against Scourge Runners, for the example, allowing the Skinwolves to really get into contact with those guys. It's a very nice little ability to be having, and a little bit of a niche pick. We do have Marauders for that front line with some Marauder Berserkers. We do have the Iceborne Marauders who do have that perfect vigor, and then that is going to be it for that front line. For the front mobility, we do have Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes, probably expecting to see some Black Guard for the Dark Elves. It is a very common pick, by the way. In the backline, we do have those Skinwolves looking to be getting on some of the larger units, so like any of the Dark Riders, the Scourge Runners, if they are able to catch them. I mean, their base speed is only 75, while the Scourge Runners are 90, but if you do pair that with that Frostworm, who does have a space speed of 90 as well, if it is able to get into range, it is able to slow the Scourge Runners enough to allow those Skinwolves to get on top of them. For the Lords and Heroes, we do, of course, have Wulfric, the Wanderer, riding in atop his Mammoth, and he is going to be bringing Seafang and Hunter of Champions, looking to chew through that front line of the Dark Elf Infantry. And in support is going to be a Thimir Balefian of Shadows with that Enfeebling Foe and the Pendulum Pendulum. So Pendulum, very good against the tightly packed Dark Elf formations, and especially Blackguard, for example, which is a major threat to the Norskins, especially with Skinwolves and Mammoths and the like in that roster. A very common pick indeed. And Enfeebling Foe is good against, for example, Malekith or any of the Combat Lords, really whittling down their melee attack and melee defense. But that is it for the Norskins. For the Dark Elves, this is going to be an army we have seen before from Slate X. He is going to be rolling out with all of the Witch Elves. So he has Witch Elves across that front line, one of which is the Sisters of Singing Doom. And they do have that Fear and Terror, which is going to be very nice to be adding to the mix, which you don't need to have a very large monster to do so. A very interesting unit to be having there. So most of the time, Terror is in those very large single entity monsters, and takes a different type of unit to deal with those. Otherwise, on the 2 flanks, we do have those Sisters of Slaughter, as we've seen before, and for the Lord, it is going to be Morathi rolling in on foot, running with those Sisters of the Singing Doom. And so Morathi does have the Enchanting Beauty, -9 melee attack, -8% charge bonus, and then the Heartrender and the Dark Sword, -9 melee defense and an additional -9 melee attack, and Soul Stealer as the only spell, looking to be really just draining the Norskins dry. For the mobility, we do have some Dark Riders with shields and some regular Dark Riders, if my memory does serve me right, on these on this build, and most of which is actually going to be held in reserve, so it actually is all of the ones with shields. We do have a couple of Dread Spears protecting these Dark Shards. Now, hopefully, these units haven't been forgotten in this matchup, but both of the front lines going to be underway as the Dark Riders with shields pretty much just pulling the attention of the Norskins away, as the throwing axe is going to be getting some nice shots in. However, they haven't really been able to deal that much damage, but the Skin Wolves definitely going to be smelling blood in the water, charging on forward, trying to get into these Dark Riders, who will do quite well against them. But the Sisters of Slaughter can be charging in themselves. They do have poison when they are engaged in melee, so that's a nice little addition there, as all of the Witch Elves do engage. And I hear that Seafang charging on forward, and it will do a holy crap, it did a lot of damage to those Witch Elves. That thing took them down all the way to nothing, as it followed up with a beautiful pendulum. Going to be taking these Witch Elves. So those are 2 Witch Elves, and even the Sisters of the Singing Doom, I believe, have taken a tons of damage so early in this fight. And things are looking rather well for the Norskins at the onset, but here come those tactical reserves. The Dark Shards, all of these Dread Spears, and these Dark Riders coming on in. Going to be getting their fire support into this main engagement. We do get a nice little Soul Stealer, though. Only going to be hitting Wulfric and these Marauders, though it does reduce that infantry grind just a little bit. And the Sisters of Slaughter, though, on the 2 flanks, though, are still standing very, very tall, and they are going to be starting whittling through. Even these Skin Wolves are doing quite a bit of damage to them. All these Marauders, even with those Marauder Berserkers in the mix, they are trading very well, and with that rear charge from the Dark Riders, even better at that. A nice breath attack, though, from the Frostworm, able to do some nice bit of work to these Dark Shards, and Wulfric the Wanderer has taken a ton of damage from all of those shots across that front line, and even Morathi, unyielding in the face of that Mammoth, does have a Scroll of Shielding popped on top of her. Actually, that's Wulfric the Wanderer, as Morathi just kind of poking that Mammoth in the rear. So Wulfric does get that Scroll of Shielding from that Fimir Balefine, able to try and tank some of this Dark Shard's fire. Skin Wolves getting into that backline, but they are rampage into them, especially with all of these Witch Elves having that Madness of Cain ability, which does cause all of the units to rampage, which is really the biggest advantage of this Dark Elf army, is that rampage controlling what the Norskins can do. And another beautiful boat going through, wrecking these Dark Riders, and going to be missing the bulk of those Dread Spears, but still doing quite a bit of damage to those guys. That Frostworm is going to be rampage, and Wulfric the Wanderer is on death's door right now. Norskin doesn't have any heals, so they are going to have to be really cautious with Wulfric here, as he is taking a ton of damage. Balance power was pretty much in Norskin's favor very early on in this game, but it is starting to shift more and more into the Dark Elves' favor, as the big targets are getting whittled down, like all of these Skin Wolves. Like the Sisters of Slaughter here are doing so very, very well. They've just been doing a ton of damage, and like the throwing axes don't really have any good targets to be firing in against. And Morathi, I think, has been, yes, Morathi is still very healthy at this point. I lost sight of her for a little bit. The Frostworm and Wulfric, the big 2 terror-causing monsters for the Norskins, are getting very low, and I think that Frostworm might even be routing here, as the charge from the Dark Riders might be enough, but it is able to regain some of its leadership. And the Dark Shards, though, continuing just to pepper Wulfric, turning him into a pincushion in this fight, and balance power shifting now into the Dark Elves' favor, as that balance of power swing ever so fickle in this game. The Dark Elves taking that battle back into their own hands. All of just like Dread Spears, all of the Sisters of Slaughter, though, I think are going to have a ton of value at the end of this, are able to kind of pull through. But the Norskins are able to start clearing out a lot of that mobility, all of these Dark Riders getting pushed back, and the Frostworm has regained its leadership. Going to be trying to assist the front line. Beautiful breath attack right into the middle of all of this infantry. Might be enough to rout the Sisters of Slaughter here, but the Sisters of Slaughter continuing to put pressure, routing off these Skin Wolves and pressuring back all of these Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes, and just trying to get this Frostworm to get into a good engagement. I think at this point just going to be trying to chase things off as best it can. And Wulfric, I believe this Wulfric on the front, has returned to the fight, though he is on just, well, I wouldn't say slivers of HP. He still has 1,000 HP left, but it certainly looks like slivers of HP. The Frostworm does drop down onto these these Dark Shards, going to be shattering them completely. And really, the Norskins just need to try and pick off as much as they can on the fringes. Losing their Fimir Balefine, though, is going to be a major problem. And, I mean, Wulfric did return to the fight, but he did once again end up running for the hills, and he is making a beeline for that white line. And if Wulfric does pull on out, I don't know if there's really a whole lot they can bring down the infantry that is left. I mean, especially with all of the Norskins just slowly getting... I mean, all the skin wolves are just so low. They're not going to be able to get through all of these dread spears. More and more rout, and that is going to be army losses. Sladex does come back with the build once again. We're going to be seeing all of those witch elves pulling through in the end, though really it was the Sisters of Slaughter, I think, that really pulled the game back for the Dark Elves here. So let's update that scorecard. So it is going to be 2-2. So we're going all the way to Game 5 in this first Best of 5 series. Oh man, has it been some fun games so far. What more can you expect from Sladex? So from the Witch Elves, though, on the Dark Elves, just not really a ton of value. I mean, actually, as I say that, we do have some that get 700, 1,000 on these guys. And even the Sisters of the Singing Doom were able to generate 700, and that was with them pretty much being deleted, like, right off the bat. They had a Pendulum and a Seafang, which like completely destroyed that front line of Witch Elves. However, the Sisters of Slaughter on the two flanks for the Dark Elves, 1,100 on them, and then 1,000 on the other one. A very strong flank for the Dark Elves were able to just punish those Marauders, and even the Marauder Berserkers they traded very, very well into. And then the Tactical Reserves, the Dread Spears, able to trade very well into the Skin Wolves, who were trying to get into those Dark Shards, who just put a major pain on to Wulfric the Wanderer. And then we just have all of that mobility, which did some decent work, but it wasn't anything to write home about. Morathi herself able to generate 1,600 from those Soul Stealers, and then just all of the debuffs around her really did help her Witch Elves and those Sisters of Slaughters even more so when all of the Marauders were a little bit too debuffed to fight effectively. For the Norskins, the Marauder Berserkers did still do some decent work. However, the Marauders were a little lackluster, and even the Marauder Horsemen of Throwing Axes, despite not having any super good targets to be firing in against, were able to generate 1,700, so both of which were able to pay for themselves. And then we do have the Skin Wolves trying to make a name for themselves in that backline, only one of them really doing anything to write home about. Frostworm, unfortunately, a nice idea, but only did get 944. It is still a very expensive unit to be bringing, and will often not pay for itself because it is a very squishy monster. It would be very nice if it had just a little bit more HP or something of that nature, but it is, yeah, it's usually not the best unit to be bringing here for the Norskins. While it is a fun one, we do have Wulfric the Wanderer. While doing quite well at getting 2,300, he is still a very expensive when he's on his Mammoth, and he just took a ton of fire. He would pretty much turn into a pincushion in this fight, and then that Fimir Bale, Fiend of Shadows, probably got a little too far forward in this engagement. While it does have armor sundering magical attacks, it is still a caster, and you need to protect it. It is not going to be able to duel all of the Dark Elf infantry by its lonesome, and it definitely would have liked to have a little bit of extra spellcasting in the late game. May have made a difference, but without further ado, Game 5 awaits us. A deciding game to see who moves forward in this Warhammer World Championship playoff match. Is it going to be Guacc or Slade? We'll find out in Game 5. The ruinous powers are fickle masters indeed, as they constantly demand their chosen champions to vie for their favor, and that is going to be no difference here in this matchup between Chaos and the Beastmen. Both forces of Chaos going to be vying for the Dark Master's favor. So for the Warriors of Chaos, we do have Chaos Marauders with some Chaos Warriors mixed in with the Mirror Guard, the Chaos Warriors ROR, which do have that nice little bit of immunopsychology. They have a very nice 100 armor, and they have the speed of the Marauders to boot. We have some more Chaos Warriors and more Marauders on the opposite flank. For that front engagement, we do have Marauder Horsemen. 4 of those going to be spread out, going to be trying some nice little bit of skirmish against the Beastmen. And in the back line, it is going to be a couple of Chaos Spawn, a nice Unbreakable unit, and just kind of able to just kind of punch through. They do have Fear as well, and we have Chaos Warriors with Halberds pretty much to counteract the Minotaurs and the Chaos Spawn on the Beastmen roster. And for the Monstrous unit, We have a Dragon Ogre Shaggoth, again, just trying to whittle down any potential large targets, any like Cygors or giants that are a potential option for the Beastmen. And for the Lord, it is the ever-chosen himself, Archaon. He strides forth atop his flaming steed, and he is going to be bringing in Fireball with the Burning Head. He also has Standard Die and the Crown of Domination, which gives +4 leadership and immune to psychology in a 55-meter radius, which is a rather larger radius than most items, but nonetheless going to be rather helpful, keeping all of his warriors faithful in their attack against the Beastmen. Now, speaking of the Beastmen, they do have Ungor Spearman Herd on the 2 flanks, but the center ranks is going to be the Bestigors. Bestigor is going to be armor-piercing, very good unit against the Chaos Forces, especially considering most of their roster is very high in terms of armor, and they are going to be wading forward. Now, they are going to be a little susceptible to that Missile Cav. They do have 95 armor themselves, though, so they will be able to withstand that fairly well, but they are without shields. For the rest of the forces, we do have a decent amount of mobility as well. We have some Razor Gore herds going to be spread out across that back line, 4 of which in total going to be protecting a pair of Ungor Raiders, giving a little nice DPS range units. Now, they do lack that armor piercing, but against like the Skirmish Cav or against Marauders, for example, they will still do quite well, and especially against Chaos Spawn, who do have 0 armor, or maybe 10. But still, nonetheless, they are going to be able to do quite a bit of damage against them, and they do have a couple of Minotaurs for support as well. Armor piercing bonus versus infantry, again, all you need against the forces of chaos, especially considering their strength is in that high armor. We do have a Brave Shaman of Death going to be rolling on in with that Spirit Leech as well as that Fate of Buna. Also going to be rolling in with a Jagged Dagger, so it does get a little bit of extra power recharge rate and power reserves, though it does have to be in melee, and you usually will see that when they are accompanied with their Chariot mount. Instead, going to be electing to just wade on into battle. A noble task for him indeed. Now, Morgar the Shadow Cave is going to be the Lord, going to be coming in with that Chaos Spawn summons. Instead of bringing their own for the units, they're going to be instead electing to summon them with the Spirit Essence of Chaos, as well as the Staff of Ruinous Corruption. So a couple of extra monstrous units to be brought to the field. Very nice little addition. But that is it for the armies, and they are going to be engaging Archaon, wading forward ahead of the rest of his army, bogging down the Bestigors as everything just piles in. There is a bunch of value here as both of the Minotaurs charge in, trying to get on top of Archaon, though both him and the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth are going to be pulling out, though that does leave that Mirror Guard alone and just completely isolated. Fate of Buna does go down on top of it, but a Burning Head in response going to be trying to roast through, but it is just going to be hitting Bestigors, and the Bestigors really are going to be able to tank that really well. I think that Burning Head really needed to be used against these 2 Ungor Raiders, as the Ungor Raiders are just whittling down those Chaos Spawn like just ridiculously well. Though the Chaos Spawn, especially with those Chaos Warriors, are able to rout off those Bestigor herd, though we do get that Chaos Spawn summon from Morgar here. We get summons on both rear charges from those Razor Gore herds, though on that far flank, the Razor Gore herds do get repelled by that Chaos Spawn, who have now turned their attention directly to those Ungor Raiders, who have done so much damage to them so far. Going to be making quick work of them, as the rest of the Ungor Raiders just trying to finish off the last on this other flank. So really, the Beastmen have done exceptionally well on, I guess this would be the Chaos's right flank on the Beastmen's left flank, but they have sacrificed their own right flank as the Ungor Raiders getting collapsed upon by the Marauder Horsemen, especially with those Chaos Spawn. They're going to make quick work of them, but both of the Chaos Spawn summons here are on the field by the looks of it from Morgar, and that is going to be inflating that balance of power for the Beastmen, as it does kind of show that in that top screen there. But both sides really are kind of having wins and losses across that front line of the battlefield. Now, the Chaos Warriors with Halberds definitely want to be staying nice and strong in this front line, going to be doing nice and well against like a Chaos Spawn, all of the Minotaurs, who have taken a ton of damage, and they will be a lot more resistant to the rear charges of the Razor Gore herds. We do have another Burning Head going to be roasting on through these Ungor Spearman herd and these Bestigors, doing a nice bit of damage. There might be enough to rout them off, but it looks like the Chaos Warriors do end up routing instead. But both of the Ungor Raiders are now compromised. The backline, the Chaos Spawn, and those Marauder Horsemen able to really do a nice bit of work cleaning out the backline for the Beastmen, but Beastmen still are just pushing farther and farther ahead in the balanced power, able to deal a very significant blow against that Dragon Ogre Shaggoth, going to be causing it to rout. Though luckily for the Chaos side, there isn't a whole lot of mobility left. We do have some Minotaurs and the Ungor Spearmen, but there isn't like any Razor Gores that are in the immediate vicinity to help chase off that Dragon Ogre Shaggoth. But that is going to leave Archaon, the Everchosen, pretty much beset on all sides. Now, the Chaos Warriors with halberds are on death's door right now. They're getting very low in terms of leadership. They are wavering themselves, and Archaon, sensing the falter of his own lines, is going to be pulling out, but it looks like the balance power is almost at the point of no return. Chaos is just faltering against the Beastmen onslaught, as there's just way too many Beastmen left here for the Chaos to really handle, and I think that is going to be just about all she wrote, especially now the Chaos Warriors have ended up routed. The Spawn are returning to that fight after dealing with all of the range units on the Beastmen, but they are just a couple units. There's not going to be able to hold off, and now that the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth is going to be routing, that is going to be army losses across the board. And it looks like Archaon, the Everchosen, is not going to be able to finish the day, as he does give a little send-off in the end. But Sladex proves victorious with his Beastmen against the forces of Chaos, earning the favor of the Dark Gods. So let's take a look at the after-battle report, and we'll update the scorecard as well. And that does mean Sladex is going to be advancing to the next round, as is predicted by my predictions from earlier on. But nonetheless, a very exciting game, a very great series. I mean, man, there are so many great games here. Really exciting to see all of these games, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what is yet to come for the bracket play. But let's go over the armies real quick before we send you on your way. All of the Minotaurs doing, I mean, okay work, nothing too ridiculous. All of the Razor Gore herds able to provide a nice little bit of mobility, nice rear charges on the two outside flanks, though unfortunately on the Beastmen's right flank that did get beat back pretty effectively by the Chaos side, and the Ungor Raiders were able to generate a ton of value against those Chaos Spawn. Really, had those Chaos Spawn not been there, they really wouldn't have had anything good to really shoot at, and they would not have gotten anywhere near this kind of value, even though they were compromised by the Chaos Spawn and the Marauder Horsemen in the backline. It just was not quick enough before they put on a major amount of hurt to that Chaos roster. Bestigors, a very nice unit, able to generate value across all three of them. The Bray Shaman able to do some decent work, and then the summons from Morgor were able to really put the final nail in that proverbial coffin. Onto the Chaos side, the Chaos Spawn, while they were able to get into the backline, they were not able to sustain themselves long enough against all of that ranged attack. Dragon Ogre Shaggoth, again, just a very expensive unit to be bringing, was not able to generate the value that it would have promised. And even all of, I mean, however, the Marauder Horsemen, I mean, the skirmish cav for the Chaos side and Norska by extension are all very, very good. They don't have that like strong DPS, but they have strong damage over the course of a fight, and that is definitely being shown here in this engagement, where all of the Marauder Horsemen were able to pay for themselves and then some, except for these Marauder Horsemen. They were not quite able to live up to the rest of its brethren. And the rest of the forces, the Chaos Warriors with halberds did quite well, and then, I mean, the Chaos Warriors, though, did not. Even the Mirror Guard just got completely just decimated by those Bestigors, and were not able to really hold themselves. And even Archaon, the Everchosen himself, only able to generate 1100. It is not an uncommon sight to see Archaon generating 4K in value, but that is not today, as the Beastmen earn the Dark God's favor in this final matchup in this best of 5 series. And that is going to be all I have for you today. I do hope you enjoyed the video. It was quite the adventure for sure. But that is it. And I do hope you enjoyed the video. And as always, have a good one.